Hello and good morning. How are you guys doing today? Just wanted to talk a little bit about another way to hook up Angela Gilbert's 6 speakers, 2 channels setup, other than with the splitters or straight off the preamp. Now with my setup, I had the ability to do the 6 speakers even before I found out even who Angela Gilbert was. Somehow I stumbled upon it in the last month or so, just browsing around on the internet. But I had an AVR set up with my 2 channel, and I run them in parallel. Now parallel is another way you could do it that I haven't seen anyone else really mentioned on it. Now I'm gonna pull in closer here to my, humble little setup, and I got a couple of my components specifically because they have dual full-time outputs. The Project Phono amplifier here, it sends out a dual XLR and RCA output at the same time, and in the manual it says you can use them both at the same time, and that's kind of how I make it work. And then same with this little TX CD player, the little one. Now the way I do the little one is the analogs run out, but it sends out dual digital also. So it sends out an optical and a coaxial, and everything is always going. So I run the digital into this other DAC CD player, and then that one sends an XLR. So I have the XLR system going to my 2 channel, and then the RCAs run to my AVR setup. So I have my 2 channel setup is completely separate from my AVR setup, with the wiring, and I can go back and forth depending from the line out on this one, on the AVR, the Pioneer. Now with my speakers, the AVR, it doesn't really cut it. This is a $300 AVR Pioneer 5-channel setup, and I just picked it up because I wanted something to have, because it's got HDMI's, and it's hard not to have one in your setup, watching movies and different stuff like that. Even though I don't have a TV out here, sometimes I have my TV on a tripod. I'll bring it out. But anyway, get back to the stereo. So you can also run your system in parallel. Obviously, if you got a bunch of nice components. Now this, a lot of preamps will run multiple outputs. This one has 3 good outputs on it. Now if I had more nice amplifiers, I would go that route. But I don't have more nice amplifiers. I just have this Pioneer, and I actually have a couple of these little Chi-Fi amps, but this Pioneer is still better. But I'm looking to get a new cheap amplifier. I want just cheap, low budget, something better than this Pioneer to run these ELACs. These Carinas take a good amount of juice, so I want to do it that way. But for right now, that's kind of how I'm running it. I'm running the system in parallel as opposed to right off of one preamp and then setting everything up. So I got to set it up so where I got to, adjust the volume here, off the 2 channel, and then I got to wheel back. That's why I ain't got no carpets on here. I like to sit on my little office chair with wheels, and I can scoot around in my little apartment here. And I get back to my little play desk here, and I got a remote, and I can play with the volume settings. And the AVR's got all kinds of settings. I only have 4 speakers hooked up to it, but it has a system, has a surround on it called extra stereo, and I think that's fairly close to what just having the backs flipped would be. Not that the backs are that important. I don't know if it matters that much, but the fronts, overall, it's the best sounding, one that's got on there. I would like to get it out for doing this setup, but it's what I got. But I can adjust them. If I had a different integrateds hooked up, I could adjust the volume. The problem with the shit remote, I got my subwoofers also set up on the Sega S there, that other small preamp, and all their remotes, the preamp remotes work the same. So if I turn my Freya up, the Sega S goes up at the same time. They use the same remote, so I kind of have to set that up. But I can turn it in. I can mute the AVR and turn off the 4 speakers and just have the 2 channel going. Not that you can hear over a phone, and I got the washing machine going again because, well, it's laundry day. But, I just wanted to talk about setting the system up parallel. And something else I wanted to talk about. So I've played around with the setup, changing my speakers around. Now I set up, the first time I set it up, I had these taller Tectons up front. And then I had the stand mount setup that I got going with. I actually had the Sir Vega LA165 on top of that one where the Z-Lacs are, and that was the forward one. And what I noticed with the big speakers up front is you had kind of a tunnel vision sort of sound stage where, it's really big up front, and then it was like a starfighter, man. You'd hear the sound stage would just like zoom, it was really kind of neat. It had exaggerated depth. It was just like I said, like a tunnel vision. It was actually kind of cool, especially when you had, the drums would roll. It would take a drum roll that went from right to left or left to right, and it would just pan into deep space. It would just go brrr, just way, deep, way beyond the wall. It was an exaggerated kind of depth of field, but it was also kind of fun. I can't say it was like, that's kind of neat, but it's not really the effect you're going for. You don't want to have, something overly exaggerated like that. So if you have your small speakers, forward, and the big speakers, on the front stage, you're going to have this tunnel vision type sound depth, which, it might be fun to play with, why not have a good time, check it out, move your speakers around, don't, it's not that hard to move speakers around, or maybe it is in your setup, I don't know. What else are you going to do? You can sit there and play on TikTok? But anyway, then I flipped them around. I was like, okay, the big speakers don't work that good. So, for up front, so I put them, I tried to mimic Angela's setup a little bit, watched the videos, and then I was like, oh yeah, he did the thing with the, the leveling thing. I noticed that, and so I did flip the ELACs around so the tweeters are lower. I swapped out the Sir Vegas for the ELACs because, I find that AMT tweeters don't really work that good as surround speakers. They have great left and right side dispersion, but the vertical off axis is just not there. They're much more of a monitor, so I was like, I better put those up there, and I put the Sir Vegas on the back again. Those Sir Vega LA165, these little bookshelves up there, now those are some bargain bin. Those just came out a year or two ago. Little bookshelf speakers, they're 6.5s. But for a $270 speaker, they are pretty awesome. I say they compete with these ELAC Carinas. Now they don't do everything, as well as these ELAC Carinas do at $1,000, but they do some things better. And you can't write that off. Like, they don't do everything as well, but they do some things better. It's a little bigger speaker, but the Sir Vegas, they have a large port in the back, and they're able to give a back sound a little bit. They're able to, fill a room, and they're a little larger, and they have an incredible mid-range. They don't have the tweeter on it is pretty good. It has better dispersion than the AM2E. It's not as clear and detailed up front and airy, but it's sense of scale, and it's not a bad tweeter. I'd say those LA165s compete with these ELACs. They don't do everything well, and they work different in different positions, but for vocal clarity and some jazz, those $270 speakers will shock you how good they can be with a good amp. Now, that amp doesn't really do that great with the ELACs. They just need way too much power. And that's originally why I put them on the back, because it really couldn't power them up front. But, doing sub duty or, extra duty with, my 2-channel, and then also with these subs working with them, it's not so bad. It can fill in, it's what I got. But I'm leaving something on the table. I want to get another integrated amp, or I'm looking at some power amp options, so I'm leaving a little bit on the table. Now that Pioneer can power my my audience channel just fine. I can leave that sitting there and still have my AVR in the system for, you know, HDMI and stuff like that, and let that be the processor. But I can add another power amp to put those Carinas a little better on the front. And I might get one of those Dayton Audio tube amps, you know, $400, and I don't know. I'd like to get some Angela Gilbert stuff. Maybe I'll get a funky or whatnot. I think I want to either replace this preamp or this power amp first. We'll see. Something like that. The little AVR and get a second amp. You know, that's a $400 deal, not a $4,000 deal. So, you know, I gotta wait a little while. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about the setup, and also I wanted to touch on, you know, after having the setup, some ideas for speakers. Now, you know, some of you more audiophile purists might think about, you know, trying it, but, you know, what speakers are you going to use? You know, use your bigger speakers from the back, but if you have, you know, so one thing I would like to try, you know, for the front stage, if you have a small pair of single driver, you know, no crossover, you know, some of those Augie types, or, you know, something, you know, like a 6.5 inch where it's got no crossover, just one of those, you know, single point source, something like that. That might be a really nice speaker for the front stage, because, I mean, not that I think that the tweeters don't play well together, but, you know, depending on what speakers you have, and, you know, if they don't complement, you know, trying to find complementing, just the idea of having, you know, the front ones not needing a tweeter. See, so now you don't have two tweeters fighting each other, but you bring, you know, that front sound up. And some of those have really nice, you know, vocals and mids, and, you know, that might create, some of them, you know, do still reach pretty high. They are full range, but that's something I would definitely consider. And the rear audience speakers can be, you know, anything from some of those little realistic minimalists, you know, remember those little speakers, you know, anything can be on the rear channel. And those are barely playing, but they do fill in the sound. You know, the front four are really important, you know, with that kind of setup. And it's kind of fun, you know. I don't have it up very loud because it's morning and I want to be able to talk. So I can hit the mute. You know, I can hear how it, here, I'm going to be quiet. That's off. You know, it sounds good. It's my two channel. My two channel system is just playing like that. And if I just bring in, you know, from the muting, I mean, you can hear the cymbals come forward. You know, the AMT also really works nice as the monitor, because, I mean, it just has this airiness to it. You know, I like the Beryllium tweeters that I have on these Tectons, but I mean, there's no perfect speaker. I mean, everyone, I mean, the Beryllium is kind of the best all around for me. You know, it gives you a little bit of everything. But, you know, I mean, it's hard to beat the AMTs in a monitor setup. Or the ribbon, you know, planter tweeters are really good too. They just don't have the vertical axis. But yeah, it just brings depth and a little life to it. Turn it up, turn it down, adjust the bass, whatnot. But, you know, I've messed with it quite a bit. And I thought about, you know, the only other amps I got are, you know, I got this little side, you know, I got some of these Chai amps here, and this is a little headphone setup I set up. You know, I'll put we got some cheap little junk speakers on it, but, you know, I can go over there and listen to my headphone setup. Nothing big, but yeah, that's kind of how I got it set up. Just wanted to touch on running the system in parallel, as opposed to everything off of one. If you have, you know, if you check your components that do all outputs at once, you know, they have, you know, RCA and XLR, and it's fine for them. Or if they have analog and digital outputs, you can, you know, then run those directly. You have more signals without running splitters, so you're getting a full signal. You're not messing with the impedance. Now, you might, I don't know if it messes with the timing too much, but don't overthink it. You know, that'll get you That should get you in trouble right there, just you overthinking everything. But anyway, I think that's about it. That's all I wanted to talk about. Have a good one.